Thank you for coming to this webinar today, which is social media for community archives and community groups. It's being run by the Community Archives Heritage Group. I'm Katie and I'm project manager for a series of webinars and in-person workshops that are being run over this year as part of the Spaces, Places and Belonging Community Hub programme. That's a project being run by the National Archives, and funded by the Arts and Humanities Research Council. I will share some links as well into the chat in a bit. Just to say, before we talk about today's session, in the autumn we are running some in-person workshops in England, Wales, Northern Ireland and Scotland about digital storytelling. So you can keep your eye out for those. We'll be opening booking for those, I think, at the end of next week, and you'll be able to find all the details on the Community Archives Heritage Group website. Before I introduce our speaker, Adam, and hand over, just a bit of housekeeping. The timing-wise, our webinar runs until about 5:30 today. There is about an hour of Adam presenting and talking. And we are, as you will have gathered, recording the session, and we will share that with you all. Afterwards, we'll email it to you. It will also go onto the Community Archives Heritage Group website. We've got plenty of time for questions at the end. So if you do have a question, I would ask that you hold that question, that you type it into the chat. I will collect them. And then at the end of Adam's talk, we will run through the questions. So please just type them into the chat. You can do that as we go, or you can do it at the end. And as I said, but for those of you who've just joined, you're welcome to keep your cameras off. To avoid any audio issues, we do ask that you keep yourself muted during the presentation. So, after all that preamble, I'm very pleased to introduce our speaker, Adam Kozeri. Adam is a very experienced freelance social media specialist who works with a wide range of museums, archives, other cultural organisations, supporting them with their social media. He's perhaps well known, though, for making the Museum of English Rural Life go viral on social media a few years ago. With a photo of a sheep from their archives. So if you haven't heard of that story, you can Google it and see it. It was a whole thing. So yes, I am delighted to hand over to Adam and to take us through today's content. Thanks, Adam.
Thanks, Katie. Yes, and it's a very big topic, so definitely please store up your questions until the end. We won't be able to cover everything, and like every family unhappy in its own way and happy in its own way, everyone's needs for social media will be different. I'm conscious a lot of you will be working for quite tiny archives and groups. I've managed social media accounts that range from, the low hundreds of followers up to the thousands and hundreds of thousands. I've worked in a lot of different archives, libraries, worked with community groups, so I'm hoping I can be a bit useful today. But the reason I am talking to you today is basically because I do owe my career to sharing archives on social media. Like Katie said, my biggest moment was tweeting this big sheep at the Museum of English Rural Life, which feels quite quaint now in 2026 when we have, everything was all about video. Social media has changed in so many ways. The algorithms have got stranger and more powerful. But at the core of every single job I've had working with cultural organizations, it's been about a love of just sharing collections and a love of sharing stories and just wanting to involve as many people with our history and heritage as possible. And I think if you start with that as your starting point, then you can't really go wrong, because social media should be about sharing our enthusiasm and getting these stories out to as many people as possible. Whether it's big sheep, whether it's talking about the strange things that happen in your archiving group, like whether a bat gets into your archive store, or even just sharing some of your most beautiful and personal stories of the people present in the archives that we care for, like this drawing of a chicken in trousers in a 17th century farm diary, which also went semi-viral. but which I think I will be talking about later, so I'm not going to go on a tangent about that. But I am conscious that social media can be overwhelming. But you have to remember, if you use social media yourself, if you're scrolling platforms like Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, the algorithm is usually giving you the best content there is. So it's probably the tip of the iceberg of things that are posted on the internet is what has been put into your feed. 95% of the other stuff people post, you'll probably never see. And you do have to remember that when you're seeing this cream of the crop and everyone posting this incredible content that does really well, most people are just doing okay. So you've got to remember that most of the bad stuff that's uploaded on social media is fine. Like, everybody starts out doing fairly badly. I've done a lot of bad social media, but it's about persevering, keeping posting, and getting better and better as you go on. You can't start with the assumption that all of your posts will go incredibly well. It's very much an iterative, chipping away process and getting better and better. But most people I talk to are quite overwhelmed, thinking that they should be posting things as high quality as, say, the National Archives or the British Museum. But you shouldn't. Everyone just gets better over time, and there are different audiences for different people and different organizations. I didn't know how much to dwell on the fact that social media is also destroying the fabric of society. But instead, I'm going to talk about audiences, because a lot of small organizations and archives, they find it difficult to grow their audience. Um, they keep posting. It may not do particularly well, and it's quite hard to seeing your audience grow in single digits rather than double digits. But there is actually an audience out there. Pretty much most of the population is on social media right now, and there's a hefty chunk of that population which are interested in archives and the kind of stuff that you care for and the kind of stuff that you want to talk about. But channels like Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok, they do hold them hostage to an extent. You need to play to their algorithms to reach them. And that's kind of because social media is pay to play. It's the way that they make their money, is by wanting you to pay them to reach the audience that you want to. Most places have to rely on the hard way, which is trying to reach them without paying for advertising. But a lot of galleries, museums, and archives I work with kid themselves that nobody cares what they do, that it's too niche, that it's too esoteric, or just maybe that other people are talking about what we could talk about better, so there's no point competing. But there is that audience out there. Every local historian, everyone interested in the area that you collect for your archive, anyone who would have an interest in your community group, they do exist out there, and there's a lot of people. And we also sometimes get into this habit of thinking when we post something, everyone will see it. But you have to remember that you're competing with all of this other content that social media platforms are throwing at people. That we're competing with cat videos, we're competing with Donald Trump, we're competing with private messages from friends. And to stand out, we have to try a little bit harder to catch people's attention and want them to share our content so that we can stand out among all of this noise. So we have to go back to, what do people actually want on social media? Now, I had a job at a place called the Audience Agency once, where I was getting very frustrated by not knowing what people wanted out of arts, culture, and heritage. So we did a UK population survey asking of people who already followed a cultural organization on social media why they did that, why they followed arts and culture on social media. And interestingly, the good news is that people are genuinely interested in our topics. So if you are posting about, say, local history, then there are a lot of people, even if they don't live where you are talking about, will be interested in stories about history and people in history, as long as they're presented in a good way, which brings us on to entertainment. I'm quite surprised that it was this high, that people follow cultural organizations for entertainment, but it's also one of the main reasons people use social media in general. It's almost become the new consumption channel in the same vein as TV and going to the movies. You go on your phone to waste time, to be entertained, while kind of still having in the back of your head, I would like to be taught something. I would like to learn something as well. But that's not to say that you should only post entertaining content, because people will also want to know what events are on, what you're doing, how to get involved with you, how to celebrate your work and show support, and sometimes even just to find out when you're open. So it's not saying neglect that part of your work, but if you're trying to attract attention on social media, then you need to grab that attention. But that doesn't mean just doing stupid trends, and doing dance videos and the kind of thing you might have seen on social media. You can still talk about your topic. It's just how to get it across, in a way which holds attention. And that's what we'll be talking about later in this talk. The royal we. I'm going to be talking about it. And understanding how that content reaches audiences is quite critical at the moment. Sometimes I think people, they overblow the importance of the algorithm, but now it is actually pretty critical to understanding why your content does or does not reach the people you want it to. So previously, and this is probably COVID era and before, most of social media worked like the social graph on the left. So you would create an account, you would choose people to follow, and you would see the content which they shared. They would see the content you shared, and occasionally you might see content from other people, who reshared content from others. So it's a network that really relies on you building it yourself and being quite intentional about the content you want to see and seeking it out. Most social media channels now operate with the interest graph. So the interest graph operates on choosing content it thinks you will like. Some of that will be from people you have chosen to follow, but very often it's built up from potentially even data from outside of social media, maybe your browsing habits, but it's also about the kind of content that you choose to watch, that you choose to like, that you reshare, that you send to your friends and family in private messages. And it will gradually build up an idea of, oh, this person likes Harry Potter, or maybe they've just had a baby and they're watching lots of videos about how to deal with tantruming toddlers. We'll show them a lot of that. And this is why everyone seems to have a different social media. You might see a video which you think is viral and everyone has seen it, but then you talk to someone else and they just haven't seen it at all because their algorithm is full of something completely different. And this is one of the reasons why so many people are living in silos and bubbles and not quite understanding all the different content that's out there on the internet. But it's important for you to know, because the algorithm will understand who to show your content to if it understands exactly what you are, which is why so many social media accounts are now about one thing. And you see this a lot even on Facebook to an extent, where, because I work with a lot of museums, museum pages don't do particularly well, whereas the local history group will do incredibly well because it's purely go on this page to hear about local history. Whereas you go on the museum page and it's about local history, but also opening hours and the shop and education projects and lots of different things. When people want to just know, okay, this is the page I go to for my town's history, and that's all I'm going to see. So there's a question of how you concentrate on just what you are at your core about. And to go into a little bit more detail about how these social media channels choose what to put in front of you, when you go onto your social media app, Instagram, whatever it might be. The algorithm will take inventory of all of the possible things it could be showing you, which might be people you follow, people you don't follow, even from advertisers. It will use a set of signals to see if you would like any of that content. So that's using your past behavior. Maybe you like short videos, maybe you like videos with dogs. It will pluck those out based on your past behavior to present them to you. But it will also predict whether you will engage. Like, what are the kind of videos and posts you have shared in the past that you've sent in private messages. So it's trying all the time to put something in front of you that will hold your attention and make you have some sort of action. And when your post isn't reaching many people, it's because it doesn't think that people will engage with your post. But luckily today we'll be talking about how to make sure people do engage with your post. And just to completely overegg the point, this is a little flow diagram of how that works. If you've ever used TikTok, I know not many of you might have because it's just another social media channel to think about. When you post a video, it will go through that process I just described to push to a load of people. And based on how those people interact with the video, it will also then evaluate it. And it's looking for meaningful engagement. So have people commented on it, shared it, sent it in a private message, have they liked it, have they watched the entire thing? And if it scores well enough on those metrics, it will then send it out to even more people. But if it doesn't, then it will basically stop it and it will just not reach any more people. So if you've ever shared something on Instagram or TikTok and it's, had so many views and then it just stops, this is why, usually, because not enough people are engaging with it. But I also don't want to overwhelm you and make you think, oh, if we don't make something incredibly engaging that reaches thousands of people, then what's the point? There is a lot of value in just understanding who you're trying to reach and being happy with, the level of engagement and reach you get with that audience. So I try to think of online audiences in 3 ways. One is your core audience. And these are people who know you. They may come along to see you in person. They may go to your events. They may know people that work at the organization. They may just use the organization. And for them, you can kind of post whatever you like because they already like you. They're already interested in what you do. They will tend to react to things just because they like you. Then there's a much bigger audience of people who might be interested in your topic or potentially the way that you do things, but they're mainly using social media for other reasons. So, for instance, I might have a general interest in history, but if I see something pop up on my feed from, a small museum elsewhere in the country, I will only give it the time of day if it's actually good, if it grabs my interest, if it provokes some sort of emotion in me, or if it teaches me something that I didn't know before. So you can't take this audience for granted because they have no prior connection to you. You're still living or dying based on how good your content is. But these people are kind of an open door because they already have an interest in what you do. And then there is the vast majority of the internet and the vast majority of the population who might have a passing interest in your topic, but they're really just on social media for other reasons. They might be primarily interested in football or soap operas or just seeing what their friends are up to or just trying to find funny videos. And for this audience, you really need to strip your story back so it's still using what you talk about, but the way that you introduce people to your archive or group is leading with something universal. And that could be with a universal emotion. It could be very entertaining hooks. We'll be talking about hooks later, but you need to grab them with something that hits them at a purely human level that makes them want to continue watching and to consume. But you don't even need to go for this audience if you don't want to. if there's only one or two of you, you don't have much time. You only want to reach people who will come and visit you, will care deeply about what you do. There's no shame at all in just concentrating on that core audience. And finally, before I start getting into the channels and how we actually make good content, this is a Venn diagram I often slap up for people, because cultural organizations can very often get stuck in this what we want circle. We often think, oh, we want to use social media to get people to visit us, or we want to tell people about our projects or tell them about our stuff. And we don't think, well, what do our audiences want? Which is very often they want to be entertained and informed and not just hear about what you care about all of the time, but they also want to see it in a format that works on the internet. Because the way the algorithm works, the way the continuous scroll works, is you do need to activate people's lizard brain and grab their attention very quickly and hold it. And it's always constantly striving to balance this. Well, we definitely need to talk about this thing, but how do we make people interested? And how do we create it in a way that actually grabs their attention? And now with all that, that was a massive preamble, but now we can actually get into the meat of it and go back to some basics as well. Because there are a lot of social media channels. They all do things slightly differently. So I'm going to give you a very basic overview of the options available to you, but I'm not going to dazzle you with massive screens full of information-ish. Facebook is a very good option for archives and small groups because it's increasingly focused on mini communities that join particular groups because they're interested in those kind of topics. And it's still heavily reliant on people commenting and sharing things. It's actually almost more like old social media in that people are much more willing to engage and comment and interact with things. X, formerly Twitter, obviously relies on conversation. It relies on having threads, so a sequence of posts which tell a longer story, but it's primarily about that interaction with other people on the platform. But obviously, I mean, I say rapidly becoming, it already is a kind of political and ethical time bomb that has exploded because of the way it is moderated and the way it's being used by its owner. But I won't go into it any more than that. Instagram is also a strong choice for small archives and groups. It's the all-rounder. It's where most people tend to, if a person is on any social media channel, it's almost always Instagram. But it is becoming increasingly focused on short videos and stories, which have overtaken the traditional just posting photos on your profile. Carousels as well have become very powerful. TikTok, you do tend to get higher engagement, but it has been slowing recently. But their algorithm is very powerful. It's why the American government basically bought it off the Chinese government. It's very good at understanding who you are and what you want to see, which also means it's easier to break through and find those people when you're posting on it. But it does require consistent posting. It does require pretty much solely creating videos. And obviously that takes a long time. You could also look into Blue Sky. There's a healthy community of archive professionals on Blue Sky, which is essentially just another kind of Twitter. So you'll find a lot of industry professionals and academics on there as they're leaving X. And it follows the same rules as old Twitter. It's conversation, it's creating interesting threads. It's where you can talk about your professional work as well as what is in your archiving group. But depending on what kind of organization you are, your audience may not be on it. They may be on something like Threads, which I probably should have put on here as well, to be honest. YouTube it can be incredibly powerful. It's the second most used search engine on the internet after Google, but it does require long form video. You can also upload short form video, so they call them shorts, the same kind of videos you put on Instagram and TikTok and even Facebook. But you usually need to be quite intentional about, the series of videos that you create, the formats, and they usually require a bit more polish than shorter videos on social media. I told you there were a lot of channels. So there's also LinkedIn, and I found that a lot of people have also left Twitter to post on LinkedIn for professional things, talking about professional developments, milestones at work, asking for advice, that kind of thing. So it's pretty much just for that. If you want to make more links with other professionals and other organizations, go to LinkedIn. WhatsApp, it's got a potential for if you have quite a niche community that you need to keep in contact with, having a group where you share that kind of thing. It's also very good to have as a team. If you're seeing things as you're researching the archive or doing projects, then it's worth having a WhatsApp group for dropping those kind of things into. And you may have heard of Reddit, which in the UK is now even more popular than X is. It's essentially lots of forums focusing on pretty much every topic under the sun. There's probably one for your local town, maybe not for your local village. And it's a bit trickier to work with, but it's very good at driving traffic to websites. You could be sharing content on there as a bit of an experiment, but it's quite rare for people to really concentrate on Reddit over things like Facebook and Instagram. But you don't have to be on them all. Very often it's a case of thinking, who am I trying to reach? Is it a very local community? Then you're probably best suited to Facebook. Is it a bit more disparate? So it might be people across the country or even across a region that have an interest in you. Is it important for you to reach more people and get them excited about your work? Then you're probably looking at Instagram and at a stretch TikTok. And so I am going to concentrate a bit more on Facebook and Instagram as channels because they're probably the ones you'll concentrate on the most. And this is where you do get a page full of text, just to dig into these in a bit more detail. The kind of people that are on Facebook, it does tend to skew older. Not that I'm saying 45 is old. I'm probably staring down the barrel of that quite soon as well. But it does tend to be a more middle-aged and older demographic. It has a lot of special interest groups. So there's lots of different niches on Facebook, and lots of local pages and groups that people share their stuff into. How you start building a community is really working with those groups. So sharing your content in similar groups that you think might be interested in what you do. You should be talking to your community rather than just posting things like a broadcaster. So rather than just saying, here is a thing, it's here is a thing, and what do you think of it? And there's no shame in having friends, family, and anyone you can persuade to share your stuff just to kickstart things. And because of that demographic, because of this niche interest, you're looking for content that's relevant to those people. Very often that's mining nostalgia. You should almost always include a photo, but you can also ask questions of your community. Text posts can work if they're interesting or funny enough. People always ask me when to post, and honestly, nobody really knows. You can think of it in terms of human behavior. Most people have their free time in the evening, but I've actually found on Facebook late afternoon kind of works when people have stopped working. I'm conscious we are still working at 4:30 on a Friday. And how often to post? You could post every day, but you'll probably, go mad with the effort of it. I would say try and do twice a week and do more if you can. And then otherwise, it's got some special features. You can create events through Facebook so people can say that they're going to them. You could start using Meta Business Manager, which is a way of scheduling content in the future, but it also gives you data on your posts and your audience. But it is a bit of a beast to use, so it takes a bit of getting used to. And if you have opening hours and that kind of thing, you can also tell people about that. In terms of how other archives are using it at the moment. You can see the Northumberland archives here. It's not even a particularly good photo. They're just taking a picture of a box full of books. But they're doing that thing of not just saying, here's a box of books. They're saying peering into an uncatalogued box for the first time, dot, dot, dots, and then they go into actually what it is. That's what I'm talking about, of going a little bit further just to get people interested. It sets up an air of mystery of what these books are, even if they're actually really boring. But it doesn't matter as long as people have clicked on that see more. Historic England are very good at nostalgia, working through their archives of photos of old places in England. And you'll see lots of people commenting on these, talking about their memories, imagining what it was like in the past. And they haven't even particularly tried to encourage that. They're just saying this photograph was from 1863 and then it was demolished. And people just start volunteering their information, whether you ask for it or not. And in terms of niche groups, I'm outing myself here because I'm part of a group focused on historic watermills. I think there's only about 84 people in the group, but this was from my days when I was at the Museum of English Rural Life. And their posts get more engagement than some established museums, just because the community really care. And the group solely focuses on watermills. And that's pretty much what we have to do, is just build that niche community and talk about what they want to talk about. Instagram, pretty much everybody is on it. You've got individuals, you've got organizations. Again, as Twitter has kind of become what it is, it's become more the home where you present your best self and where most people are. Building a community, though, requires using much more video than you would elsewhere, because most people are now scrolling reels. So if your post is in a video, then you're likely not reaching them. But you can also reach people by commenting and sharing other people's posts, following other people, just trying to get yourself in front of them as much as possible. Single images do not do as well as carousels. So carousels are a series of images. Because videos are high effort, you can still do carousels and add music to them if you're using Instagram on your phone, and that will turn it into a video and reach more people. You can obviously use it when you have events. If you're doing day-to-day work, you can be sharing that for your stories. You can be commenting on other people's posts. When to post is, again, when people are active, on their way to work, when they're at home, wasting time in front of the telly. Same kind of posting schedule. For your tips and tricks, if you're frustrated by the fact you can only have one link in your bio, you can use something like Linktree, where you can have multiple links in your bio. You can also use Meta Business Manager, and I've already told you you can add music to carousels. And in terms of how archives are using this, people do actually love how archives look and how they feel. A lot of people I've seen working in archives are taking pictures and then just showing people as you work through this folder or this document, what is in here. There's a bit of an opening a box feeling to it. They talk about individual archive pieces and the story behind them. This is a video from the Postal Museum talking about the last letter delivered by pigeon, I think. I'd have to check. And Buckinghamshire Archives, going a bit further. So that larger audience of saying, just entertain me first and then tell me about the archive later. This is them doing a kind of meme saying, what's your favorite winning dog from the 1863 International Dog Show? So there's different routes of attack for Instagram, and I'll be showing you more later. But first, I wanted to talk about making a post. Probably the most important bit. And as I mentioned before, every post is a battle for that first 3 seconds. You are trying to grab attention as quickly as you can. Content does seem to be endless. People are just scrolling through it's an infinite scroll, which they might actually be banning by legislation because it's so addictive. and you're judging these videos and pieces of content incredibly quickly. And actually, I've personally posted videos that have had hundreds of thousands of views, but actually only 2 or 5% of people actually watch the entire video. People's attention spans are just completely shot at the moment. And in fact, I read an interesting article in The Atlantic recently about how social media content is rewiring our brains as we become an almost post-literate society that doesn't digest information in the way that we used to. But that could be a whole other presentation. Really, all you've got to think about is segmenting your posts into 3 bits. Oh, actually, no, wait, sorry, that's my next slide. First, I wanted to talk through some basic principles. And this is what I've tend to bring to posts, having done them for the past 15 years or whatever it is. And if I had to boil it down to one bullet point, it would be this. It has to pass the who cares test. Whenever I'm writing something or creating a post, I do just think, who cares? How do I make them care? What is it about this thing that I'm talking about that can make them care? Is it a particular facts about the archive thing that I'm talking about? Is it trying to bring out the emotion of the people I'm featuring? Is it trying to bring an emotion out of the people that are reading it? How do I just grab their attention the best way? And you also don't have to feel like you should post like you're creating an advert or talking in a way that you think you should be talking. If you have a massive energy and enthusiasm about the work that you do, about your archive, about your community group's work, you should bring that same enthusiasm to your writing. There's also a lot of debate about whether people should try and keep to a particular tone when you have multiple different people making your posts. I'm more on the laissez-faire side. I think as long as your enthusiasm comes through, people won't pay too much attention. And you should think of the emotional reaction you want to provoke. Do you want to make people curious? Do you want to make them laugh, surprise them, pity something? Do you want to inspire them? Just think, I want them to feel this, and then think through, how do I go through making them think this thing? You should also be trying to get people to interact. The algorithm likes it, but it's also what we're trying to do to get people to share and engage and contribute their opinions. Usually that is by asking them to do it and encouraging them when they do it. Very often it's just posting something that people want to react to without even being asked to. And usually that's because people love empathizing and connecting with a personal experience. So it's bringing as much of yourself or, the personal angle of whatever you're talking about into it as much as you can. And now I can talk about the basic structure. So the first part is your hook. And I've written this for video, but it's the same applies to text and other things. I'll be talking about that in a second. You have those first 3 seconds. How do you get people to think, oh, this is worth paying attention to? An example I've used recently is King Henry I is lost, buried under Reading Abbey ruins. If you started your video about that topic saying, hi, I'm the creator of Reading Museum, and did you know that there's actually a king called Henry I buried under Reading Abbey? By those first 3 seconds of you just saying, hi, I'm the creator of Reading Museum, people have swiped past. If you start with even, did you know there's a lost king buried under Reading Abbey? Or this king died of a surfeit of lampreys, and then eventually getting onto the fact he's buried in Reading Abbey, would hook people in better. And I should know because I've done a video on it. Then you have about 15 seconds for your content, which could be just telling the story, giving the answer to the hook. This is really the meat of whatever you want to talk about. And you have a call to action at the end or some kind of summary or emotional fulfillment. Emotional fulfillment. It's your wrap up. And this could be the sign off for the story that you've just told. Like, who knows, maybe someone will eventually dig Henry I up. They can't because he's buried in a pit of executed convicted criminals because they built a jail over Henry I's burial place. They could find him. It's going to be very painful. But that kind of, okay, and now here's a reason to potentially see other videos on our page, to follow us, to do something. Some random animations there. And hooks can be in terms of audio, they can be in terms of the visual, it can be in terms of the text. So this Buckinghamshire Archives video starts with a really good textual and auditory hook where he's saying, I've got some really bad news today. He's saying there's been a leak in the archive, and then he turns around and there's a leak, like a vegetable leak in the archives. So it makes you want to watch, and there's also a funny payoff. There's not even particularly any content in it. In terms of a visual hook, I love this video from the Museo Sorolla, where they just pull out the roller racking of artworks. We have so many of these kind of opportunities in our archives and groups to just get people interested in wanting to see what comes next. And this last one is a cheat because I posted it for Reading Rep Theatre, but it's a text hook. Back in 2021, this guy friend sponsored 30 seats at Reading Rep with a ridiculously long message. This is that message. It makes you want to find out what the message is. You'll have to go on Reading Rep's Instagram page to find out. But I've also got a couple of examples of this in practice from the Royal Academy of Arts. Here's the hook. Does this street look familiar? Very often people just say, this is a painting by Anthony Rayton RA, painted in blah, 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 blah. Instead, it's starting, does this street look familiar? And then it's giving that brief context. What am I looking at? Building up the context of the post. Then if people are still reading, you can dig deeper, give even more context, put in some expressive language, and then end with and by the way, did you know it's in this exhibition? You can go and find out. Here's the artwork credits. Here are some hashtags. That same post on something like X or Blue Sky or Threads, we have to really pair it back. We have a different type of hook. So this guy's 97 years old and he's still painting every day. I don't know if he's still alive. This was quite a while ago. And then just some warm emotive context. Posted in November, so calling back to summer, making it slightly relevant. And the call to action is just a link. But it's still got that same sort of structure. Hook, content, call to action. You'll see the same thing even on websites, articles. The hook for an article, it's as much the title, even the image, but also your first paragraph. This is actually quite a bad hook, to be honest. Turner's Secret Nudes Exposed, though, is quite a good hook. So you could kind of see this bit as just giving you a bit more context. Then obviously you have the article itself, and then the call to action. This thing is on until blah, blah, blah. If you're writing newsletters, the same rule applies. The hook isn't so much the title of the newsletter. It's about what is in this newsletter. And it's also geared to your audience. Ashman's newsletter is very much about people interested in digital tech and arts and culture. So it's more just like, here's what you're going to see in this newsletter. Then your contents. And by the way, I'm offering some workshops, call to action. Hook, content, call to action. It's the basic building blocks of every story that you're going to read on social media. But how you start turning that into different formats is where it gets a bit trickier. But these are very common formats that I see again and again on social media. You have the explainer, and that's taking a fairly complicated topic, might be something in the news, might be a product, and explaining it. This is an incredible video about textile history, talking about why old sweaters put diamonds in the armpit. When you get this presentation, by the way, all of these videos will be linked, so you can click on them and have a look at them. A bit of a complicated video to make, but here's this thing, how do we explain it in the best way possible? Why old sweaters put diamonds on the armpit. You can do case studies, so taking a specific subject and walking through its context, its history, why it's worth talking about. I like this video talking about um, Darwin and his, how he worked with finches to understand evolution and their different sized beaks on the Galapagos. You could have a presenter talking through a story to camera. This is very common at the moment on social media, but it does depend on whether you're comfortable on camera. I am not actually that comfortable on camera, so I instead tend to do a lot of voiceover videos where I point my camera at the thing I'm talking about and then talk over it. But people engage much more with a person on screen than they do with just random pictures. You could also do a how-to. So if your archive or your group does things and makes things, you can do a how to do this thing. This is where carousels are very useful. Just put some text over some pictures, walking you through it. I like this one from, so this thing's in the way. I think this is the Royal Academy, how to make a 4-meter dog. And you can also use carousels for telling more of a story. So if you don't have time to make a video, you could just try and take a few pictures and overlay the text of that story on those pictures. And this is by Jacqueline, who's used this carousel to talk about her love of history, being a black person in the UK, and the kind of feedback she's had about that, which is a good story. You should see it. But you can still also use Blue Sky and Threads and X to do more classic threads where you tell a story just through text. Jay Hume is a vicar who tells a lot of these good stories about his life as a vicar. And again, it's very personal. There's a good hook in there. A few days we dug up these bones from a church, and it's his story about interacting with the police and everything about that story. It was great. But you could also concentrate on individuals and stories. This is a lady talking about her favorite art piece. So it's just taking a single object from the collection and talking through where it came from, what it means to you. This is a man who collects stamps, like wax seal stamps. And it's just him going through shelves and shelves of stamps, taking some out, talking about their individual histories. It's again, people want to know what's in the box. And a bit more of a classic archive post. This is just someone taking out a very visually attractive map of steamship routes. And again, just talking through what it is, what it means. As long as there's something for people to look at, you'd be surprised what they watch. I've watched some absolutely inane stuff just because I'm already on my phone and that looked pretty, so I'm going to watch it. But you could, if you do have footage in your archive, archival footage from the past, places like Imperial War Museums, London Archives, plenty of other places, simply just upload that onto social media, put some captions on it and call it a day. And people love seeing history brought to life in this way. There's also Nostalgia Baits, which works so incredibly for so many local archives. The Black Country Living Museum do it quite regularly. Do you remember riding this trolleybus? Photo Sensor up in Berwick does incredibly well with this. It's purely for the people of Berwick. There's regular people commenting on it, contributing their memories. They're asking people, can you identify people in these photos? Do you know where this was taken? And people saying, oh yeah, that was John down the road. Like, here's his number. Go and talk to him. So highly recommended if your archive is on a local area. But you can also give your professional insights into your work. This is an incredible video just walking through a film prop department, but even just walking through the archive. I don't know what security concerns you might have, and just picking things up that are to hand. Because most people don't go into the back of an archive. It's interesting to them. I've already talked about Jacqueline's post, and there's a lot more of this come to work with me type post. So this is one for the Natural History Museum, but just saying like, this is my day. This is the kind of thing we collect. This is who we talk to. This is what we do in our day job. People love seeing things that they don't normally get to see. There's also the story. I don't know why London Archives has slipped in there, but taking taking something from the archive and just talking through its story. So this one on the left, I think was from that music library up in Manchester. I've forgotten its name. Chatham, maybe? Talking about this book where this kid's doodled a load of chickens. I talked about J. Hume's Threads. The Welcome Collection talked about this book where, again, this little girl doodled this entire story about her pet cat and making up stories for it. If you find a story in your archive or you encounter a story in your work, people love connecting with something that just tells a narrative and, well, is interesting or cute. But there's also trends and vibes, which is quite a difficult one to get people to do because I think you're either good at it or you're not good at it. And I'm surprised by the amount of archive trend posts that I've seen doing incredibly well. This one on the left saying your brain must be so quiet when you're in the archive, and it's a series of items from the archive and her brain just going wow, wow, wow. Someone saying, oh, you're an archivist, why haven't you digitized everything yet? And just looking very disappointed when you've done so much in the 2 years of being the archivist, but then you remember the 250-year backlog. This kind of feeling that people can resonate with and engage with. Oh, and here's one from the Imperial War Museum. You're breaking up with me, but I've already spotted the dress-up area in the museum. Very often you need people who are using social media a lot to recognize when you can make this kind of post. It's not for everyone to do. You don't have to do them. So on to tips. General tips from my years of experience. I highly recommend building your own archive. And that means we all have to deal with copyrights. We all have to deal with ethical concerns. There might be areas of your work and areas of your archive which aren't appropriate to be sharing with the entire world or using in a informal way. And what I found very useful is sitting down with each other and deciding from the beginning, yes, we're allowed to use these parts of the collection or these parts of our work in any way we like. And these are the parts we have to check with someone else. And these are the parts that we will not touch with a barge pole, because then it gives you freedom to do what you like with what's safe. And everyone knows that you won't be doing anything weird with stuff that you shouldn't be. But also during your day, during your work, just constantly taking photos and videos of every interesting thing you ever find, because you don't need to make a post straight away. You can use it later. I've had pictures and videos sitting on my camera roll for months, waiting for me to have a spare half hour to turn it into a video. I had one where I visited this castle down in Odeon, in Berkshire or Hampshire, I think, where it's the castle that King John rode from to then go sign Magna Carta. So I just happened upon that castle on a walk with my dog and took some photos and videos as I was going around it. And then I think it was 3 months later, just turned that into a tiny video and it got 10,000 views, I think. So you never know what you might eventually get around to using. But you should also start small. Like I said, don't be overwhelmed. You don't have to post every day. You don't have to be immediately making incredible videos. What I find is quite useful to at least commit to a cadence. So commit to posting on a topic weekly. Maybe you're sharing one of your nostalgia posts on Facebook every week. And then you're gradually trying to build yourself up. Maybe you only do one video a month, and gradually experiment to see what works better and what doesn't. But you should also be talking to each other. I don't know how big your teams are, but you don't have to post straight away. If you're taking those photos and videos for later, you could also be dropping them in a group WhatsApp or a Teams chat. Other people might be able to do something with them, and encouraging other people to take those photos and videos too, because your beginning of an idea can then inspire others, be built on by others. You could come back to it much later. And most of the posts that I've done really well is because people have thought, oh, this is a bit interesting. I'll tell Adam about it or take a photo and we can do something about it later. even at the level of there was a cat outside the Young Vic Theatre. Someone took a picture, sent it to me. It did okay. When we found that bat in our archive at the Museum of English Rural Life, that's because someone told me about it. And then we could go and take pictures of it and build the story up about it. So you need to be telling each other when there's something interesting happening. Which brings me on to the "oh, that's interesting" test. Because if you're ever talking about something in your work to somebody and they say, "oh, that's interesting," that is the universe telling you that other people will probably also find that interesting. This chicken in trousers, which is now on Tea Towels, it was only posted about because the archivist was accessioning a farm diary and thought, oh, this is actually quite an interesting book. It's got some nice doodles in it. I'll tell Adam about it. And I also found it interesting. So I thought other people may find it interesting. And then build this story around where it came from, how we accession archives, setting it up as a story where there's a big payoff at the end. Because there was this 14-year-old from 200 years ago doodling things in his maths workbook, which a lot of people can connect with, and ending with this drawing of a chicken in trousers, which was a bit of a meme at that point, because people were putting chickens into jeans, which sounds very stupid, but you work with what you've got. And then it's bullet pointing your brain. This might be a bit intense, but this is actually quite often my way of doing things. I like to specifically draft content in that hook content call to action style. If I'm thinking through a video, I might put the images in that I want to use and write the script that goes on top of it. But I'm also drafting and redrafting, coming back to things, showing it to other people. And there's definitely a case of getting over that fear of criticism. You should share it with people. You should let people tell you whether they think it's a good or a bad idea. Sometimes you should stick with your gut, even if people say that it's a terrible idea. But use your common sense. But it's easier to break down an idea into this kind of format than to just have that blank page syndrome. And you will also need to embrace failure. I have embraced failure. I've ran accounts that have hundreds of thousands of followers. I've also ran accounts where I can't get them to go above 80 followers. So very often, a lot of accounts are relying on their name recognition, National Archives, the British Museum, that kind of thing. People will follow them because they already know about them. They already have a reputation. If you're making something from scratch, unless you really hit upon something popular, it is going to be a numbers game. You'll have to keep posting for the love of posting. Eventually, it will pay off as long as you're trying to make it relevant, as long as you're learning from what you think might work better or fixing your mistakes, as long as you're evolving, then you're improving. Eventually, you'll find your community, but it does require doing all the stuff that I've talked about in this presentation. So what now? I'm driven by wanting to see more arts, culture, and heritage online to combat all of the crap that you see on social media, because there's a lot of crap out there. But all of the cultural content won't exist on social media unless we make it. I often have debates with people about, what's the point of social media? And I think if your mission is to engage people with your archive, with your group, to teach people about particular topics, to get people excited about your topic, then doing it on social media can be as valuable as doing it in person. They're different experiences, but for me, whenever I see someone comment on a post, oh, I've learned something new, or this made me laugh, or this reminded me of this memory, or I shared this with my granddad because we used to go to this place together or do this thing together. That's what makes it worth it for me. But you have to create it in the first place. And I've put my money where my mouth is, because like I said, I started as an old fart on Twitter, and since then, video has become incredibly popular. I don't have a lot of time in my life to be a content creator, but I set my challenge of can I grow a history TikTok account to over 10,000 followers? Um, and I did manage it after a while, and it required really embracing failure because my first videos were terrible. But it's gradually just learning from other people, keep creating, see where it takes you. And you can eventually make it work. This, I don't think I'm going to dwell on too long because it takes probably about 10 minutes to talk through. But I feel like most people have one of these skill sets. They're either very creative, or they're very strategic, or they have deep expertise about a topic. And it's quite dangerous to let just one of these people do all of your social media. You need the expertise because it's what people are coming to you for. But if you don't know how to make it into something creative that people will actually watch, and if you're not posting it in the right place with the right audience in mind, then it won't reach anyone. And the same goes vice versa for the creatives and the marketer. I did write an entire article about this, so I can include it in the links afterwards. And to go back to the failure, I feel like I'm really stressing the failure point. But sucking at something is the first step towards being good at something. Find your comfort level. Could you just do a carousel where you tell a story in 5 images using a tool like Canva? Could you do a voiceover instead of presenting on camera? Could you start sharing those nostalgia posts on Facebook? Just start small, keep building, and see where it takes you. But most importantly, it is meant to be fun. There's a lot of scare stories about social media, but like I say, your audience does exist on there. There are people sharing nice things, having nice conversations. It's just trying to make that part of your algorithm, and keeping hold of that passion of talking about what you do, what your archive has, what your group does, and what it achieves, and have fun. But that's my talk. A little bit over an hour, I think.